This is a Working Poor podcast, and I'm your host, Austin Phelps.
I am joined tonight with my special guest, Abigail Wheetley. Abby was my professor during my first year at Southern Illinois University. She worked under the Saluki Success Department, which basically was kind of a resource center for first-year students to guide them to campus resources they otherwise might not have known about. And Abby is continuing that work today at John A. Logan College, which is a community college in the area, where she's a trio mentor and a transfer specialist. So basically, you work with at-risk college students. Can you
Yes.
kind of explain that a little bit? What the school's definition is at risk, and are low-income students considered in that group at all?
Yes, low-income students are definitely considered in that group. In fact, we do kind of a point system. So the more the more unstable your life has been, the more likely you are to be included in the TRIO program. So if you, for instance, have been on public assistance, if you've been a foster child, if you are a first-generation student, all of those contribute towards you becoming part of our program, where you get kind of I like to think of it as a concierge service through your higher education experience. So yeah, anything that you need, we are there for you.
You also teach English at Southern New Hampshire University, which is
Mm-hmm.
an online university. And I think that it's kind of
Yes.
interesting the dynamic you have here, where before this was all happening, you were navigating, you were helping students navigate their college careers at John A. as an advisor for
Right.
in-person classes, while also already knowing what online courses was like. So
Yeah.
when going back a little bit to spring 2020, what was the initial reaction that you had when you figured out that your students at John A., the public university, would no longer
Mhm.
be coming in person? And were you given any prior notice to that?
Oh my God. When I finally found out that we were going to go all online, my main feeling was deep, unparalleled relief. I was so concerned. We, like everyone else, had gone into spring break, and I was like Chicken Little. I was the Cassandra. I had been watching the news really closely. I was in contact with some of my friends on both the East and the West Coast who had observed some things and seen some things that were very much foreshadowing. And I was like, we cannot be having dental, like, as you know, at a community college, you have a lot of people who are doing their first 2 years, but we also have a lot of people who are going into the trades, which a lot of the trades are nursing or dental assistant or massage therapy, very intimate trainings.
Mhm.
And I was like, what are they thinking? Because our college, like many other colleges, just wasn't taking it as seriously as I think that they needed to. So when they finally, it was the day before we were supposed to come back to campus, they decided to extend spring break a week and use that week to train faculty on how to teach online, and then go to a primarily online model with some in-person classes. And by the time you got to the end of that first week, it was all going to be online. So, and at that point, they said basically nobody's allowed back in the building. So it went from we're not going to close down at all to we're only going to have online classes for things that don't need that hands-on training, to we're going to go all online classes, to we're not allowing anyone else on campus within 7 days. So that was a roller coaster, but by the end of it, I was just so relieved.
Being a student at SIU, on the other side of it, yeah, it was completely that same type of thing. Just not knowing one day to the next. I remember we were in spring break, and I was working
Right.
still for the university housing, and I was going. My boss was picking me up to work because, like, the situation I was in. But
Oh
she
yeah.
picked me up, and I had not heard about anything that was going on. And she said, "Did you hear about what's going on at the campus?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, they're closing it down." And it was just so unexpected. And being a student, it was just a really kind of a crazy situation, for a lack of better terms, of being, registering for like in-person classes and then being thrown in to online courses. And you on the other side of it, being an advisor, how did your students react to
Oh
this?
goodness.
And, considering, you are, working with at-risk students in particular, this must have been a
Absolutely.
whirlwind for them.
It was a whirlwind for them. The very first day that it all went down, the thing is, I was actually having symptoms. To this day, I don't know if I had it or not, but both my husband and I had really bad chest colds, extreme fatigue, just body aches. And it was weird because I had already gotten sick with whatever was going around a couple of weeks before, and now I was sick again, and that usually doesn't happen to me. So that was weird. So I wasn't coming on campus that week that we were supposed to be learning how to teach on online. I already know how to do that, and I just went ahead and took all of the rest of my sick and vacation days because I was symptomatic and I couldn't get a test. So the very first day of that, I called each and every one of my students. I kind of cold called them to see what was going on, what they needed, how they were doing. And it kind of ran the gamut. There were some students who were kind of relieved, who were kind of treating this like, oh, it's like a snow day or a snow week. And there were other students. I had one student who her full-time job was taking care of senior citizens who lived in their home. She wasn't a nurse yet, but she would, like read them the paper and make soup for them and watch TV with them and do some light house cleaning, that kind of thing. And so I just remember just being so worried about her, so worried about her clients, just seeing how slowly the society was catching up with everybody. Just so many people had kind of very fixable problems that just weren't being recognized yet because COVID was so new. So yeah, it was very, very strange. There was a couple of students who I couldn't get a hold of, and I haven't heard from to this day. It's like they just dropped off the face of the earth. Maybe because they became unemployed and couldn't pay their phone bill, and then couldn't pay their bursar bill, and so I'm sure that we've lost a couple just between the cracks, which breaks my heart. That's kind of what my job is all about, is catching those students, but sometimes they fall so fast you don't even see them go.
And considering they are already at risk, moving online and not having that in-person, everyday kind of, connection to the campus, it definitely, I think, drives a larger barrier, would you say?
Absolutely. I think that sometimes having part of how I sell Trio to students is saying, you can always come into my office if you need anything at all. If you come onto campus and you're just having a bad day and you don't want to go to class, you can come and find me and we'll hang out. I'll give you some candy. We'll figure out what's going on. We'll fix it. If it's mentionable, it's manageable. I've kind of always been that person. And so for me not to be able to be physically present for my students makes a huge difference. And like I said, if they couldn't pay their phone bill and they were cut off that way, and obviously they probably can't pay their cable bill to keep their internet on, then what? Like, how do they even begin that journey of getting a hold of somebody if I'm not on campus, if I'm not reachable any other way? And then there's all that shame and embarrassment that comes with being poor and being broke and not knowing what the next thing is to do, and not wanting to admit that it has to do with not having enough money, which I think is always the biggest problem. Just being able to say, I don't have enough money to do X or Y. That is such a hard thing for us to admit, especially as Americans. It's part of our society that we never say, I don't have enough money. If you don't have enough money to go out for drinks and your friends invite you out for drinks, you make up some other excuse, because to say you don't have enough money is, for some reason, the worst thing to say, even though it's true for every single one of us, at least some of the time. So it's such a ridiculous and common thing to never, ever say. But yeah, I know that I definitely had students that simply did not have enough money, and I've lost them for that reason. I hope they come back.
And, all those, reasons that you mentioned, being poor and, the embarrassment of it, these are young adults, and, the prime of their lives, and, they're going through all this. So it is, something that they don't even at this point know how to probably completely understand themselves. And then to have the juggle of school and the shift to online. How many of your students, like, if you could just kind of guess a percentage that you work with at John A., would you say are low income?
Oh, I would say 100% in one way or another. They are all Pell eligible, which means that they have a very low amount of family or personal contribution to their education, because that's kind of how the federal, the FAFSA application works. So they have to have close to zero family contributions in order to be Pell eligible, and most of them are. That's one of the ways that you qualify for the TRIO program. So yes, I would say almost 100% are low income.
And how many students do you work with in the TRIO program, would you, estimate?
Between 20 and 30. So just to clarify, every one of the students that we serve in TRIO program is probably in one way or another low income. Even if they make a middle class income, if they have children or if they have a spouse that's not working, then they are then also a low income family. And this is also true for most of the Johnny Logan students. I think that even though it's a smart decision to do community college, you're going to find that generally the people who go that route have a lower income or don't have the same kind of opportunities or privileges that those who go directly to a four-year university do. So yeah, I think it's kind of across the board. It's part of the reason I love community college so much, is because there's the opportunity to help students who are low income. But you're absolutely right. It's terrible that such a high percentage of our population and how many students there are that have this low income status who are also seeking higher education.
Since you do work at both Southern New Hampshire University and John A. Logan, what was the difference between the sort of reaction the universities had?
It was actually really interesting that you asked that, because you think with a college, and they do have a physical presence, but it's very small. I think 90% of their instruction takes place online, but they do have a brick and mortar campus in New Hampshire, oddly enough. But yeah, you would think that being a mainly online college, that would be seamless, or you wouldn't even hear about it. But in fact, it definitely impacted our students, because like you said, for an online university that has a very low tuition rate, and it has open enrollment, there are a lot of people who are working full time, who are very poor, who are just one paycheck away from losing everything, who lost their jobs. And it was a very strange transitionary semester, because there were some students who, for instance, were nurses or nursing assistants who were training to be nurses, who suddenly were working 70, 80 hours a week, who were used to working 20 or 30 hours a week. There were people who lost their jobs, who were not going to be able to pay their cable bill and were losing their internet access, which means they couldn't attend classes anymore. There were people who were sick and in the hospital. There were people who had loved ones who were sick in the hospital all of a sudden. And just the anxiety alone. I had so many students who were just having a really hard time focusing, getting things done, sleeping even, just because the anxiety levels were so high. So that was just, it was interesting to watch. Okay, if everything is already online, let's say like perfect universe, let's say it was a perfect universe and for COVID, and every single university was already online, it still would have been problematic, especially for people who are classified as the working poor. Absolutely. And I was incredibly flexible, as I always try to be, and I think that made the difference for some students. But for other students, again, there are some that just dropped off the face of this earth. That one day they were logging in every day and doing work, and the next day I never heard from them again. And there's just so much you can do.
And that conversation about low-income students and the access to internet and the supply that's going to take is something I definitely want to talk about further on in the conversation. Since we are approaching the fall 2020 semester, it looks like a majority of the universities in the United States will be resuming in-person classes to some degree. I know the university I attend, Southern Illinois University, is doing hybrid, a mixture of hybrid classes, online classes, and in-person classes. I myself am only so all my classes, I have 5 classes, all of them are online, except for one of them is an education course, and my lecture is online, but my discussion section is in person. And I am a little worried for that, because looking over John A. Logan's plan and SIU's plan, to me, they just don't very much seem like plans. I mean, these are, it seems like a lot of repetition of what the public health departments have been saying, that we're going to be wearing masks and we're going to be staying 6 feet apart. But I'm thinking, what's the practicality of, this actually happening at the university? And I know, since you were at John A., I'm sure that, you have very much, these worries. And so what is your position going to be going into this fall semester? And how are you going to be advising students? And will it be in person or online or a mix?
Well, so far I have been advising students purely online. I have not met with a single student since before spring break, and that's been by design. I just cannot think of a situation where it is entirely necessary for a student and I to put each other and each other's families and communities at risk in order to meet yet. There may be a situation, I mean, if a student shows up and is wearing a mask and I'm wearing a mask, we have plexiglass and they have an issue, I'm not going to turn them away. But I definitely am wondering about the practicality of even creating that situation. Like, why is it necessary? Like, what is the purpose here? Because you're right. I read over both of the plans, and they seem to be more guidelines than plans. Like, there's going to be social distancing. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean for welding? What does that mean for a discussion class? Like, how can you discuss things at a distance from behind masks? Isn't there a better way to do that? So yeah, I definitely have concerns. I definitely have questions. How often are people getting tested? If someone has symptoms that is not a fever, because fevers seem to be what everyone focuses on, and not everybody who has COVID has a fever. So it's great that we're going to be taking people's temperatures, but it doesn't really protect everyone from COVID, not by a long shot. So I don't know. I'm nervous. I'm nervous, Austin. I'm not going to lie. I wish before everyone returned to work at the pizza place, everyone would get tested. I wish before everyone returned to Congress, everyone would get tested. I think before everyone goes anywhere, we should all get tested. However, there is going to be a false sense of security if I test negative that I can then return to campus safely. And that's not necessarily true. In fact, I could test negative and be in an incubation period. I can be infected and test negative, and then a few days later start having symptoms and test positive.
And I completely agree. And we have all these protocols in place, but what is it really going to do if nobody's being tested? It's obvious that the coronavirus is getting worse here in the United States, and I think that just to prevent this from causing any disruption, we should just fully plan for an online year. I think that it just makes sense to do that right now. So being an advisor at John A. Logan, and going over these plans, what is kind of differing from SIU's plan that John A. has, or maybe doesn't have, or as an advisor, have you been kept kind of in the loop on how things are going to happen this semester, or are you kind of in the dark like everybody else still?
I am definitely kind of in the dark, just like everybody else. I get informed about 12 minutes before my students do about any changes that are going to be made. And the main differences I see between John A. Logan's plan and SIU's plan is SIU's plan acknowledges, I'm just going to use the word grudgingly, that they are basically a small town, whereas we are a destination that people go to and from. That's like a grocery store or a library. But people live at SIU, so there's dining and there's housing that have to be considered. I mean, the students go to the doctor's office there, students go to the library there. It is its own little community, and so I worry very, very much about students there. It's odd because at John A. Logan, of course, students will be coming to campus and then going back to a variety of different little communities, whereas SIU has its own community. And I honestly don't know. I think it will be interesting for scientists in the future to study how spreading impacted the different communities, whether it's going to be worse to have people coming to a community college, or there's going to be undoubtedly, I mean, this is the thing, Austin, it's not if, it's when and how bad. There are going to be outbreaks at SAU. There are going to be outbreaks at John A. Logan. And the question is, who's going to get hit, how quickly, and how bad is it going to be before we just shut down and go online? And I also want to just put out here once and for all that schools, colleges, universities, these are not magical places that just appear in the ether where students and teachers get together and exchange ideas. These are infrastructures that are upheld by the zillions of employees that no one's even talking about. So even if all the instructors and all the students decide to learn online, I still have to go to the campus, librarians still have to go to campus, financial aid officers still have to go to campus, that there is a lot of in-person stuff that still has to happen, and people are still going to be at risk. And I think that needs to get figured out, even though it's an impossible situation.
Are you allowed to do your job remotely this semester if it were to be shifted online at all? Or are you saying that you would, you would not have the option of doing any work remotely?
No, basically, I have been working remotely basically since spring break, but about 4 weeks ago, we started going back to campus 50-50, which means that half of the time, half of the staff is on campus. So there are 6 people in our department. So 3 of us go in on Monday and Tuesday, and 3 of us go in on Wednesday and Thursday. And during the summers at John A. Logan, we all have Fridays off. And we're about to extend that to the 5-day work week starting next week, but not everyone is going back full time. Some are doing 50-50. But if I just say, hey, I want to do all of my work remotely, I don't have that option. In fact, being part of the Wednesday, Thursday crew, if I say, can I work on campus on Monday and then stay home on Thursday, I can't. But there's no flexibility at all. And it's just the way it is. My sister actually teaches, or rather taught, grade school in Las Vegas, and she just resigned from her position. She was supposed to teach kindergarten because they could not make accommodations. And she's high risk. And she also felt that she'd be doing her students a disservice to be their only for part of the year and then either get sick or get scared or, God forbid, pass away, that this was going to impact them emotionally. So for her students, she resigned her position and is now going to be teaching at an online school. I think that's what's going to happen with a lot of quality instructors of all different types, that they are going to simply find online opportunities because it's safe.
And I've seen a lot of that, of teachers retiring this year and everything, before this next semester starts. And so much, I just feel that so much of this could be prevented if this whole summer we were, just gearing up for a full online year and everything was, ready to be implemented and everything had been worked out. If we had just been planning this the entire time, I feel like the solution would be much better. Because I am, pretty sure that we're going to have a mid-semester shift, just like that happened in spring 2020, and we're going to be all unprepared again. It just is going to be another awful semester, and at the students' expense, right? Working poor students who are, at risk and, are already struggling with so much and, cannot really afford to take this hit. So it is just very disappointing, the kind of lack of response. And like I said, most of my classes are online, but I do have that, discussion section for my education course. And, it's just like, why couldn't that be online also? And I understand it's education, going to be a teacher, and, you kind of, I guess, want that face-to-face with the students. I think it's just going to be such a complicated, issue when it's all said and done. Because I'm just waiting to go to class one day and to leave and then be notified that I need to go test for COVID-19 because somebody in the class was positive.
And there aren't any clear guidelines. For instance, at the door of Johnny Logan, it says, go home if you have a persistent cough. Well, I can go home, but what if I'm out of sick days? What if I don't, what if my supervisor doesn't believe that that is appropriate? In fact, there was one day I had a persistent cough and I messaged my two fellow coworkers. I said, listen, I have a persistent cough. I can stay home or I can come in. They both said, oh, go ahead and come in. Like, some people are just like not really bothered by it, which is interesting, I guess. I don't know. I was like, well, they seem to have informed consent. I guess I'll go in. Unfortunately, nothing bad happened. But yeah, I agree. It seems to be very personal how seriously people take it, how stringent they are with their own personal restrictions and hygiene and mask wearing and so forth. And that gets scary because really it has to be uniform if it's even going to come close to working.
And that makes me wonder, are these protocols just even going to be followed? That SIU, the few that they have listed, are they going to be followed? Is cleaning really going to happen in between classes? Are the, at a regular day on SIU, you can't use the restroom without it not having been cleaned all day, So it's just like, are we really going to be disinfecting everything in the campus? And is the student center going to be open to freely walk into, or is the campus going to, are they going to be patrolling people that are coming? Like, I don't understand.
How is this going to work? How is any of it going to work? And when, not if, when the first person tested positive, what then? Do we do contact tracing? Do we alert everybody? How much of that person's privacy is taken into consideration when they do notifications? Where are they going to be sequestered to? Like their dorm room? How are they going to get food? How are they going to use the bathroom? Who are we going to hire to bring food to these quarantined students? Who are we going to hire to be cleaning the classroom every 55 minutes across campus all day, every day? I mean, there's a certain amount of madness to this plan that just seems insane.
And some of it just doesn't make sense, and it seems like it's almost just to try to almost keep people happy in a way. I'm on SIU's plan right now about what they're going to do in fall 2020 for students that are moving in, and it says that no more than 50% of students on a floor will arrive on the same day, and no more than 2 family members may help each student move in. So basically, they're going to have different days for students to move in, but what happens after that? Then they're still all going to be on the same floor together. So it just really makes no sense. It's like there's all these protocols, but at the end of the day, this isn't going to stop the coronavirus from spreading if students are living together in the dorms and they're going to classes together. And these are young adults. And, I know that I'm 24 years old and, God, I feel older than I am. But, when I was just even a couple years younger, I just know my mentality was just so much more immature. And I just think, what about first-year students that are coming that are 18 that aren't following this as seriously as they should because they're young? Or how has your students' reaction kind of been to this?
So far, so peaceful, I would say. However, just kind of looking out across the landscape of the world, I know there are a lot of young people who believe that universities are overreacting. I see that a lot. At the same time, I see a lot of students really being like, "Where am I going? Like, for what
Mm-hmm.
reason do you want me to go there?" Like that seems a little bit extreme. And a lot of students just feeling kind of caught in the crosshairs. Like, what else are you supposed to do? If my choices right now are going to a campus or going to a store and working there where I'm going to be on the front lines, or being unemployed and moderately homeless. I mean, what choice do they have? This is probably of all the necessary evils right now, higher education is probably your best bet. And I think it's higher education's responsibility to make that a safe bet and to make that one that students can take instead of going and working at Walmart or working someplace where they're going to be exposing themselves to potential harm. I think that it is the university's job and role in our society right now to be a safe bastion, a safe place, a safe port in the storm. And I think it's the administration, not the instructors or any other part of the university, that is making that difficult because they're focusing on the bottom line, unfortunately, which is that this is economically impossible to keep universities open and not have students paying the fees that they need to pay and bringing the income into the communities that students live in, which was noted in the I think it was the university article, the NBC article. Yes, it was the Tampa article. It was the Frank Gadian. He was focused only on the economy. I think that he said that he was a provost or he was a dean of a college and said something like, quote, "We're doing our part for the economy. Like this is going to bring in so much money to the surrounding area." And I just that the idea that we're doing our part, like it's somehow noble for the economy to bring students back and put everyone at risk, that really bothers me.
You're referencing the article from TampaBay.com, which cites that the University of Tampa will plan to reopen the university with mostly in-person classes. And just to get that full quote for the recording, Frank, the dean of the University Sykes College of Business, said, "Let's say that UT decided to close the residential aspect and say, we're doing distance learning," he said. "Out of our 10,000 students, I'd say 60% are from out of state, another 20% are international. You'd have a big effect of people not coming back here and not spending money. That's going to hurt Tampa a lot. So we're doing our part, I think, in terms of helping the economy." You, Abby, being an instructor and being, someone who is very involved just with the students that come into her office and, that you work with every day, how do you feel when, this person is talking about education and, they're talking about, the amount of money they can make from it? Is that kind of, backward to the whole mission?
Oh, you could not have said it better. Yes, because when I think of education, and I also have my degree in library science, I think it's about libraries as well, is if you've heard the call, you've come to serve, then you're one of us. And when you've heard the call, that means that you've heard the call to create access, to create collaboration between yourself and the learner. You've heard the call to exalt and to lift up people who may not have another stepping stone to get to the next place. And somebody who would say something like that has not heard the call. They have heard a different call, and it's to a mission that I don't share whatsoever. I don't care if we're all eating ramen. I mean, isn't that part of what it's supposed to be like? Aren't we supposed to have this poverty experience as part of our growth? So yes, let's all eat fucking ramen for a couple of years and think about our place in the universe, and have that be our education experience, and have that be a more universal experience. Let's let some members of Congress, let's let some provosts eat some ramen for a couple of years, and learn what it is to be a part of the working poor community. And I think that we'd have a lot more empathy and a lot more infrastructure in place for situations like this.
What are your feelings in general about Tampa resuming with mostly in-person classes? Because from what my understanding is, this is even a further degree than SIU or John A, to where SIU, right, 4 out of 5 of my classes are basically all online. Tampa seems like, most of their students will be returning and having some form of in-person, contact. And with coronavirus cases spiking, what's your just opinion on that?
Oh my goodness, it's terrifying, Austin. It's really terrifying. What's interesting is I've actually been spending the last week emailing each of my students because I know, God bless their hearts, they're not going to check, letting them know which of their classes have been moved online, which of their classes have been moved hybrid, and it's like 90%. I've reached out to about 20 students, and one class so far have actually been in person, and it's an acting class, and I think it's probably going to get moved to online or hybrid before the day is over. So I'm really shocked that in Illinois, where we've actually had okay numbers, I mean, we've had some outbreaks locally recently, which I hope go down, but for the most part, Illinois has been doing pretty well. Pritzker's been doing really right by us, but Florida
Mm-hmm.
is living in another reality. It's living in a reality where this is a person-to-person responsibility, where it really isn't
Mm-hmm.
that bad, that it's mostly has to do with your political party, and if you are truly American, you won't let it bother you. And for some reason, that has created a huge problem in Florida, especially in Tampa, which is not only in Florida, but it's also a big city. And I wish I could say I don't understand why they're doing this, but I do understand why they're doing this. It's for money, it's for profit. It's to continue to toe the line of the fairy tale that the president and many GOP members keep telling themselves, that this is all not really that crucial. It's just really not that important. And if it was that important, would we be going back to college with full capacity if it was really that bad? Obviously not. And it's a strange position they're taking that is going to kill people. And so yeah, I guess the bottom line is, Austin, is it pisses me off. That's what it does.
And I'm pissed off too. And when we
Yeah.
have a president that is just so against, the whole narrative of science, it's just
Yeah.
the fact of science, not even, he's spitting his own narrative, but when he's against science and has just now been photographed with a mask and is just now starting to change some of his language because he's obviously being forced to, because the election's coming up now, kind of focusing a little bit on the working poor side of this, and zooming in on this for a second. So working poor students are definitely, I would argue, like I said earlier, among the most impacted by the coronavirus pandemic and by the shift to online classes. And I know you mentioned earlier that back in the spring semester of 2020, you had students that were logging on to do their online work. They were doing it every day, and then they would disappear. Or maybe a student,
Mhm.
who maybe was never able to do the online work at all. And it brings up the conversation about how there is now more of a burden on the shoulders of students, in particular working
Mhm.
poor students, that is, having to not only now have the resources for online classes, so they're going to have a laptop that can do, multiple things. They're going to have a stable internet connection, and, their mobile
Mhm.
hotspot on their phone isn't going to work for this. So
Right.
are you worried for the students in your TRIO program? And are you worried in general for working poor and low income students that this could just be, more of a burden? And, is there any sort of, solution to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is something I definitely worry about. Johnny and Logan, bless their hearts, they did have a small stack of laptops that they were giving out, but they didn't make that public. That they would do is they would message the advisors and instructors. So if we had a student that we knew needed
Mhm.
this, then we could kind of put them in touch. It was because there was a very limited supply, which kind of broke my heart, because again, it really meant that the students were going to have to admit to something that they do find personally shameful. Like, I don't have enough money to pay my cable bill. I don't have enough money to buy a laptop. And that shouldn't be shameful, because laptops are really expensive.
Mhm.
Another thing that's interesting is the TRIO program, because it's a federal program, and it has a lot of rules about what we're allowed to do with our money and what we're not allowed to do with our money. And we're not supposed to be allowed to buy anything tangible for students. That we can buy tickets to like movies or to theater programs. We can travel expenses, that kind of thing. But to buy a student an object and hand it to them is not usually allowed. But they have changed a lot of those rules because of COVID. Because, for instance, we're not going to be able to take them to go to see Hamilton in St. Louis, which is something we would normally do. But instead, we can buy a bunch of laptops, or we could put some money together to pay cable bills for students, or to have emergency aid for that kind of thing. So because the federal government and a rare moment of clarity and good decision making has changed a lot of those rules for us. We're actually going to be able to do a lot of good for students, but again, they're going to have to do some advocating for themselves or some communication with us to get that into their hands. But that makes me feel a little bit better because I know when students do come to me with those kinds of problems, I may actually have a solution, which is hugely empowering. Southern New Hampshire University, my online job, they have actually increased their funding for laptops and for online access, not so much in response to COVID, interestingly enough, but in response to the Black Lives Matter, recognizing that there are so many disenfranchised groups, especially disenfranchised by race, who might be disproportionately impacted by the lack of access to laptops and to internet. And so part of their response was to do that and also to change the curriculum for criminal justice to make sure that we are educating our criminal justice majors in a way that is going to be helpful and safe for all of our citizens. So that's just my huge plug for Southern New Hampshire University. They are an amazing, amazing place to work.
Would you recommend, I guess there's kind of two questions. Would you recommend, that students move to online university? And then how do they get over the hurdle, though, of the extra cost?
Oh, those are very good questions. I'm of several minds about this. First, I just want to make it very clear that John A. Logan is a fantastic community college with a great staff and great resources, and they have been moving mountains to make sure we have a fantastic online presence. So anyone who's hearing this is like, oh, she seems kind of down on the place where she works. Not at all. They are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They are great. Anybody who's going to John A. Logan, stay in John A. Logan. You're in good hands, and I'm going to make sure that everyone has a great semester. Having said that, Southern New Hampshire University, not only do I, as an instructor, have an infrastructure that is developed for me, it's developed for me by an entire small network of class designers, people who do pedagogical research, who create interactive modules. This has been, and they revamp and grow and change their curriculum constantly, always having in mind this is going to be an online experience. This is going to be an asynchronous learning experience. And that is, of course, going to give them an advantage to a world that is always taught online or taught in person. And now is suddenly going to be teaching online and trying to make that shift kind of as we go. That, of course, is going to be a very different feeling. So, and also, I have to say that there's going to be a lot of predatory online learning, quote unquote, that is not accredited, that in fact is just there to take your money and just there to give you a phony paper degree and is not really good. And I think a lot of people are going to be hoodwinked by that, where they could have had an actual learning experience with credits that were going to transfer and be valuable from some place like John A. Logan. So I would say right now, maybe the devil you know, if you can do that safely, if you can learn at your institution where you already know and you're comfortable there and you know the instructors and you know your advisor. Because this is, I mean, let's all remind ourselves, like 1, 2, 3, this is temporary. We cannot have COVID forever. There will be a vaccine. There will be a cure. There will be an end to this. Maybe before spring, this time next year, we maybe just be doing a bunch of remember when. So don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't leave your university or college to go to an online learning module or structure just because it seems like the best idea right now, because it may actually not so much be the best idea. So yeah, several minds about that, but those are my thoughts.
How comfortable are you, going to your office on campus and everything when the semester starts, kind of on like a scale of 1 to 10?
A scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like the least comfortable and 10 being the most comfortable.
Yeah.
I would say I'm like maybe a 4. Really maybe more like a 3.2. Like I know that I can control myself. I can control whether or not I'm wearing a mask, whether or not I wash my hands, where I sit, where I stand. But there are some times where you just cannot avoid another person. There are sometimes you can't avoid what the other person is doing or deciding to do. And I cannot opt, obviously, to not go to work unless I'm going to quit my job, which I cannot afford to do. So it's complicated. It's not ideal. But yeah, just try to focus on what you can do for yourself to keep yourself and others safe and just hope that everyone else is doing the same.
I know I've asked you so many questions and we have talked about so much, but I just kind of want to
Yeah,
get now, which it's been a great conversation, and I've
good,
loved it. And,
good. I've enjoyed myself.
thank you for, thank you. I'm, new to doing
Oh
this
yeah,
alone. Like I said, my co-hosts are gone. I'm
you were doing a
on my
great
own.
job.
But I thank you. But I just want to ask you, do you kind of have any final thoughts, final concerns, anything that I didn't bring up that you would like to mention, or anything of that sort?
I think that one defining thought I kept having is that this is kind of a day of reckoning, I think, for everybody. That there have been so many things in this last 4 years politically that have exposed inner workings of things, or the true attitudes of certain people, or the true feelings and positions of individuals or of areas. And I think this is kind of the higher education's moment for everyone to stand up and be counted. And so I think this is an opportunity for administrators to prove once and for all that they care more about their students' lives and the lives and well-being of their staff and faculty than they do about money or the bottom line or their own incomes. I think that there has been a lot of perception of administrators and provosts and presidents as something not so great. So this will be a great time for them to really redeem themselves and really demonstrate what it is to have the calling to go into education and what it means to truly be invested in education. And I would love to see that play out.
Abby, there's been, in this discussion that we've had, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of emphasis on, what resources are going to be available for the students, and what, what resources are they going to need in order to have a successful semester. But what resources are you going to need that you don't have? What resources do faculty, need that they don't have?
I think the biggest resource that faculty kind of universally could use is certainty. We just need to know what's expected of us. If what is expected of us is to teach entirely online with digital resources, someone just has to tell us that and say for sure this is going to be the plan. It's the shifting ground, it's the moving pieces, it's the bait and switch, it's the expectation of instructors to do incredible acrobatics at a moment's notice. There's nothing that we can't do. We just have to be told when and how to do it.
I want to thank you so much, Abby, for
It
coming
is
on the
my
show tonight.
sincere pleasure.
And I just want to say welcome to the working poor family. And I know
Oh,
that
thank
you
you.
you yourself are, a proud member, and you
Oh
yourself
yeah.
have struggled, and have your kind of own story to tell. And that I was actually like very, excited to help you tell through the Daily Egyptian article, which, I'll be posting below, in like the
Yeah.
little box under in YouTube. But I just want to say you're an amazing woman and professor and just person in general. And
Oh.
talking to you tonight has been wonderful.
Oh.
And you're really just, I remember going into, the fall 2018 semester, my first year, being 22 years old, having had dropped out of high school at 17, and not ever wanting to have dreams of being an English teacher, but thinking, can that even happen? Being someone who dropped out of high school, doesn't even have their own real high school experience, but trying to make their life rework. And then, I remember having your
Sure.
class and being introduced, to this, failure to success story that you had, which, is just one to share. I hope everybody checks out. And I just, you have really just been such an inspiration to me, and I'm sure so
Oh,
many
bless your
more.
heart.
And
Oh.
once again, thank you for being
Oh.
on here.